Hello, hello.
Hello, hello, indeed.
So, this is the second episode, Glenn. What did
It
we
is
learn
indeed.
from the first one?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's really around exploring the echo chamber and then ensuring that we definitely look to escape it.
And it's something that I'm really proud of because we are now not changing the echo chamber and have a different guest with a different expertise on helping us to escape it or manifest it, maybe. I don't know. Let's see. I think before we jump in, do a quick round of intro with everyone so that we know who we are, what we do, and then jump right into the echo chamber. Why don't we kick us off with Siadhal, our guest?
Yeah, pumped to be episode 2. Wish I had been episode 1. I feel like that that's going to be a claim to fame somewhere down the line. I'm a co-founder at a company called Metaview. We're an AI company focused on the recruiting space. Can talk a little bit more about what we do if it comes up, I guess, during our sort of exploration of the echo chamber. Spend most of my time trying to grow this company and build a product that helps organizations hire with more precision and more efficiency. We think AI is really good for those two things, being more precise and more informed, but also being radically more efficient with how you work. Father of 2, used to work in technology, but worked in technology my whole career, was a product manager before starting Metaview as a high growth US company, Uber, small fintech startup in London before that.
Glenn, founder of Nevermind the Job Spec, podcast host, event speaker, communicator, and really ready for this conversation. Like Siadhal says, there's a lot to explore within this kind of umbrella of AI, that's for sure.
Yeah, and my name is Matthias, Senior Director Talent at Amnify and partner in crime with Glenn on this Escaping the Echo Chamber. And let's talk a bit about the Echo Chamber again. For people who have not heard or seen the first episode, the Echo Chamber that we have in mind is AI is revolutionizing TA. This is something that we keep on hearing from vendors like LinkedIn, but also from people who build AI and use AI to build better TA products or TA tech stack to help us to be better in our jobs. We really had a good conversation in the first episode. Is this really something that really revolutionizes TA? What does revolutionizing mean, actually? I think, is it helping us? So that's a little bit the echo chamber that we are still trying to escape here, but now have someone in as a guest that really is building and working with AI and can help us. Where are the limitations, or where is actually the real impact?
100%. And I think it's worth kind of contextualizing this in so much as, an echo chamber is essentially, kind of a space where if you join it, your kind of opinions, your thoughts, the information kind of reinforces your opinions around a particular topic without actually having any external challenge. So from our perspective, I think it's really around acknowledging that the kind of information that's flowing towards people and talent leaders at the moment, and the narrative that they're that they're consuming, but equally offering a perspective of an outside challenge to, okay, how do they utilize, adopt, where they're going to implement, the timelines for that. And I think that's the one thing I really want to kind of discuss with you, Siadhal, is the timelines, because everything just feels so immediate. So now there's this immediate pressure on people and talent leaders to essentially adopt AI now. And I was at an event about 3 weeks ago, and at least 70% of the people in that room, people and talent leaders, had not adopted AI in any kind of formalized way. They were having conversations with perhaps vendors. And I just wonder, from your perspective, when you're talking to kind of people and talent leaders and leadership teams, do you get that sense of, oh my, we need to do something now, we need to be adopting AI right now?
I think there's some organizations where there's almost like a top-down directive of, listen, if you come back to us in 6 months' time asking for sort of more budget for your team or whatnot, and you haven't actually tried to sort of take advantage of these productivity gains that are at our fingertips, then that's not going to be a good look. So I think there's some awareness of that, and there's some top down. There's a lot of awareness of that. There's some top down forcing of that we see, but I wouldn't say it's like the most. I wouldn't say it's the most. Like, most companies still don't have that. I think that a lot of folks are still focused on their business problem and how to solve it. Different people have different ability to understand how to understand their business problem, understand how to solve it. So not everyone does that expertly, but they still like fundamentally are focused on the things that they care, the things that keep them up at night. And some folks have very much opened their mind to AI being a part of how to solve that, and some folks are still a little bit sort of stuck in their ways, in my opinion. So yeah, but I would say there is definitely urgency in pockets. They're probably the loudest people as well, of course, and it could even be the echo chambers we live in, where that's probably the type of media that I consume is more sort of those folks. But then I was at an event. We most of our customers are quite, I would say, basically tech or organizations that serve tech companies, but we do have a bunch that are maybe more traditional enterprises, and they sometimes, a few weeks ago, they asked me to come and speak to the team. And it's different. It's a different vibe in those companies, and so it's a good sort of jolt to realize that, hey, they're not thinking about this anywhere near as much as we are.
Which is reassuring to hear, because echo chambers start by the credibility of the source. So I'm not good at remembering these things, but like PwC recent report 2024, 73% of US companies report using AI in some areas, including talent management and workforce planning. McKinsey, very similar. AI investments over the next 3 years are going to increase fundamentally in functions like HR and talent acquisition. So when you're reading that as a kind of leader, you're like, we need to get started with this. We need to be on board with this, or as we're losing time, traction, and ultimately, to your point, kind of competitiveness.
Yeah,
are we going to be
but I do think that's.
Kind of... Go on, please. Yeah.
I do think that's right. I don't fully buy those reports, because I think obviously AI has been around for a very long time, and so depending on how you ask the question, and I'm sure McKinsey and PwC have very big AI practices that they're looking to feed up with clients. So don't people, maybe whether they should pay attention to that report or not is not for me to say. But I think that the best argument for having some urgency around AI adoption, even if I'm a big believer, which I am obviously, is no matter what, even if you're a bit of a naysayer, even if you're a bit cynical, then there's still a chance. There's still a chance that it's going to be an absolute revolution. And therefore, for you not to sort of have some exposure to it is just a very big risk. So I do think, I mean, some echo chambers are going to be right, I guess. And I do think that echo chamber is one that people should really think about, because again, there's a very big chance that some of the stuff you're doing is going to be obsolete soon. Now, it might not be. It might be overblown, and we might all end up with a little bit of egg in our face. But the at least the downside risk of that is not like, wow, I'm now like not useful in the workplace anymore, which is the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I would love to have your take on one of the topics that we had in the first episode, where we touched upon this a bit in more detail, is when you see right now the hiring demands that organizations have, the situations that we see in the economy, right? It's a challenging time. It's unpredictable to a certain extent. People do not hire too much. How can AI, especially in TA now, make a difference? Is it just like do more with less, and that's the only use case here? Or, also this constant threat that we keep on hearing that, you don't need recruiters anymore. Why would you need recruiters, right? We have AI now, so they can do the job. So where would you draw the line, Sal, in this? Is this like too exaggerated, but does it need to be exaggerated in order to drive change? Like, what is your take there?
I do think it is hard to predict. I think definitely the biggest benefit that we see this, not just in our data, but in like with other folks we sort of interact with, the biggest immediate benefit is time saving. Like, people are mainly using it, like the bucket of tasks that suddenly you can automate has gotten larger, and therefore you can outsource more of those tasks to AI. And then of course that leads on to your second point, does that mean if that ends up applying to all of my tasks as a recruiter, then like what's that going to mean for me? But right now I'd say the biggest impact is on time saving. I think that's I'd go as far as to say that's a fact. I think I think that's where we're at on that one. In terms of the longer term impact, so yeah, I think people take solace in this sort of idea that of course it's not going to replace our jobs, it's only going to help us, it's a tool, this type of thing. I think that's true, but I think people might be misunderstanding how it's true, if you know what I mean. Like, I think people interpret that as almost like a don't worry about it thing. Yeah, it's going to do these things, but I wouldn't interpret it that way. I think like some of the sort of tasks that recruiters, TA folks do, I think a whole lot of them could be actually done by AI. And then what someone that works in talent acquisition needs to do is think about, well, what's the new thing that I can start to focus on within talent acquisition that is differentiated. So the goal stays the same, which is to get great people into your company as quickly as possible. But you might have a wholesale changing of the tasks that you're responsible for. So it might mean it's a different profile of person who's better suited to it. It might mean you're someone who's like very relationship oriented and all about sort of, understanding the sort of almost like amateur psychology of what's this going to get this person ticking about this role. Or, maybe it's someone who sort of really sort of spends tons and tons of time really pruning and cultivating their personal network and really commits to a certain industry and make sure they know all the right people in that. Like, those types of things are very, and I'm just throwing them out there. I'm not saying that's what people should go and do, but if that's their opinion, they should. But I do think I think although it's true, it won't replace recruiters, because I just think it's an economics thing. If I'm Meta and Google and I'm trying to hire the best people to work in my company, and we all have access to the best AI tools and the most powerful AI, I'm still going to be thinking, what's that sort of cherry on top that I can put? What's that human touch that I can have to mean that I outcompete my rival? And I think humanity is going to play a role in that. And that's what the job of the recruiter is going to be. It could be very high leverage. It could be more like a sports scout, where like sporting data is like really transparent. Everyone's got access to the same data. Maybe you sort of like looking in like other corners of the world for talent than other people are looking, that is like less exposed to this, or you're spending more time on employer brand. So they think, well, I know that's a great team to go and join because it's going to help me get to this place. And you're making more of a song and dance about the people who came in at a certain role and went on to achieve amazing things. I just think that's when you start to break away from some of the administrative tasks you do in day-to-day recruiting, which I think a large portion of them will go away. You just unlocks a whole nother part of what it takes to win the best talent in a world where that's not the operational excellence is not the thing anymore. It's something else. So I think that will still be a thing. I think those people will be called recruiters. It could require a different sort of makeup of individual that's going to really excel at it. It could be a different job description, but it's still the task of the recruiter is to be the person, the human in the loop who makes it so that, hot engineer over here joins my company and not my rivals.
I think it's a really interesting point you make, in so much as the narrative around, kind of parts of a kind of recruiter's job disappearing. The flip narrative of that is actually your role is evolving, it's changing. And as humans, broad generalization, on different degrees, we like and deal with change. I think if it's kind of forced upon us, we're more resistant to it. I think if it's something that it feels like a kind of like co-pilot adoption, we become more comfortable with it. I think to your point, which you've opened up, which I love this idea around job titles and kind of the current structure of the talent acquisition team. I'm a great believer that actually at a kind of sourcing level, that's going to probably move more towards kind of prompt engineering in some way, data analysis. I don't think you'll have the traditional sourcing as it is now. I think in terms of recruiter talent acquisition, to your point, that kind of narrative around scout and actually being, like actually returning to probably fundamentally what recruiters were supposed to have, which was a really strong network. You know what I mean? It's now really being able to sort of like leverage that, build that out, make those human connections, because the actual automated task of maybe application degree of assessment is going to be done with a kind of platform play. With regards to, I guess, coming back to that sort of echo chamber, are you finding any resistance in the kind of conversation? I don't mean to go into naming names and stuff, but when you're talking about kind of what your platform can deliver, do you experience any resistance in the kind of conversations from individuals that are thinking about how is my role going to change?
Not with the way our product works, and the focus of our product. No, the resistance wouldn't be around. Most people like breathe a sort of a sigh of relief about how our product is helping people, because it's very obvious. No one gets into recruiting to like rewrite their notes after the interview, right? That's the benefit that a lot of our customers feel on like day one of using the product. It's just literally something that they don't want to do. That's often not actually baked into their day. So a lot of the time, like if you're a recruiter, you might have back-to-back you want to have back-to-back interviews because that means you're closer to closing some of these roles, and then you've got to think about the admin is like you do it in your own time. So it's not really factored into how you schedule your day in most cases. So it's not almost like, and it's also not factored in that much, at least officially, into what doing great at your job looks like. Now, I would actually argue that giving great notes, great synthesis, a great summary to the hiring manager is really good for your career, because I think what your relationship with your hiring manager is so key in getting on. But it's not really like on the like if the JD for a recruiter doesn't mention like ability to write great notes. So no, we don't have that problem, but we do have the resistance we do have is more around, I think that it's more around the anxiety of what's next. Okay, so you have the AI in the call, it's doing this thing for me. What's it going to do for me next? And like, what does that mean for me? And obviously then you have like a fork in the road, like personally, you have a fork in the road of resist this thing because I don't know what it's going to do next. Obviously you could talk to us about what it's going to do next and we can tell you, but if that's not happening, or do you sort of take the more logical approach, frankly, which is, yeah, there's a bit of uncertainty about what's going to happen next. Frankly, the biggest AI companies on the planet have uncertainty about what's going to come next. And so I do too, as the recruiter, maybe thinking about using this tool. But the reality is the doing nothing is not a good option. So, this is going to help me. I'll sort of take it with sort of, what's the word? I'll adopt it with positive intent and with the sort of best intentions, and run with it. I think basically, I think it's really interesting to explore the echo chamber. I think it's really good to sort of have understood the sort of the perimeter of the topic, as it were. But what you realize is it can get a little bit academic because this stuff is happening anyway, and you're as an individual operator, unless you are like one of the people running some of these like ginormous companies, and even then I'd question whether you're really going to influence its outcome. You're not really going to influence the outcome. Which is sad. Like, I don't know if that's sad or not. I think you can influence the outcome in terms of making sure you harness the technology in the way that you think is positive for the world, but you definitely can't influence it by like not going along with it.
I think within that, there's something that I'm kind of keen when I'm talking to people about kind of AI. It's almost like you have a responsibility and accountability for your own AI literacy, and I think it's about kind of power and kind of it comes from knowledge, right? And if you start to really sort of lean into this and kind of understand what it means for you, and to your point around the uncertainty going forward, there's a lot of uncertainty going forward, but I think the danger is you retreat into the echo chamber and almost listen to the things that reinforce your current belief, as opposed to leading with a change mindset, which says, okay, well, this is going to be something that is consistent in work as a whole going forward. I have a responsibility to stay relevant and increase my own AI literacy. So I wonder how many kind of conversations you're in where you're really quite getting interrogated about what the platform can do and what sits underneath it. I'll be interested to know if you've been in some of those calls when you're like, wow, okay, so I've got a bit of an expert in the room here. This could be really interesting.
Yeah, it happens sometimes. Yeah, for sure. Where people have, even at some companies, they've like might have built their own, internal applications on top of,
cool.
Maybe they built their own GPTs and these sorts of like, very like approachable things that folks can do. But it obviously demonstrates the curiosity and obviously people build powerful like things that matter to them using that for sure. So yeah, it happens a bit. And yeah, I think we enjoy those. I mean, just from a commercial perspective, we enjoy those conversations because it's. I do think now is a really good time to experiment, and our product's a pretty cool thing to experiment with. But equally, we also have many folks who, again, to go back to my earlier point, are sort of much more focused on the business outcome. It's not really about sort of this being an AI tool or not. It's sort of, it might be a cherry. It might be like, okay, cool. I can also adopt this as part of this AI drive we have, but it's not actually the thing that they're turning up for. It's more they're thinking about, I can, solve the problems that have existed in my team for a while.
let's talk about, I think, Glenn, you mentioned this. When we look at time horizons and look at this year, and also look in the future, like what was the biggest promise of AI maybe this year, and did that hold true to the fact? Was it really something that we leveraged on versus what's happening next? Yeah, I think Siadhal, you mentioned this, which was very interesting to say. Even though I am working with AI, I have a product with AI. Am I sure what's happening next? Yeah, I think it's on every side of the medal of both sides, as a user or as somebody who's building it, a certain unclarity of where this is going. But love to hear a little bit more of the 2004. Like, did you think that AI, the promises, everything that happened, leveraged, or was this already a hype? Too much of a hype?
I think I probably wouldn't use too much of a hype, but I would say that there have been significant advancements in like just the quality of the underlying models, and therefore just with the models improving, a lot of the application layer things improve as well. Like even if, for example, my company had done nothing this year, our product would have got better because we are sitting on top of ever improving models. So there were really significant improvements. I think the improvements that the biggest, like the flashiest launches this year, have been, obviously you have like the real-time voice and like voice generation via OpenAI. You have this sort of concept of these artifacts and these canvases, which I think is quite a big, it's not flashy actually, but it's really powerful. So if you start to use, obviously in ChatGPT, but also in via Claude, you can sort of iterate on an asset with the AI, right? Which is a change to just like this conversational thing. We're actually working on this thing. So I would say that to me is like really exciting, but more for like what that could mean for how we're working with AI, as opposed to because like, wow, now the world's changed because this is happening. So I don't think there's been like a revolutionary thing that occurred this year, really. When I think about so the thing that I think was a big improvement in 2024 was, and this is me in my echo chamber. Obviously, I spend most of my time either talking to people on my team or people in my family, so they're a bit biased, I guess. Like actual adoption, I do think actual adoption of AI into workflows has moved on. It's not just like using this set side product for like this certain like single player thing I'm doing where I'm going to ask ChatGPT a question and then come back to my team. People might still use ChatGPT in that way, but I think generally one thing we're seeing is a sort of a greater expectation that people, if you are adopting like a business application, like an AI native business application, it's not sort of an individual thing. It's like we're thinking about how the whole team can adopt it. And we actually see better results even at the individual level when a tool is adopted across the company, funny enough. So literally when you look at our productivity gains that folks get, they're actually higher per person when it's adopted across the company. So that's pretty cool. That's like, I think a really, really, really cool observation, really cool data point. I think the thing that we're excited for, and I think will make everyone feel, to your point, Glenn, around AI literacy being really key, I think everyone will start to appreciate that being so key, at least in the midterm. Now, I think in the long term, who knows? Maybe you don't need to be literate with this stuff at all because it just understands, we all have a chip in our brain and it knows what we're thinking and that's all we need. But for now, we need to have this sort of, we need to have this midterm literacy. Yeah, AI, Metaview's next product release is a chip for the brain. So no. The long term, the midterm, I think this working with AI is going to help people both also increase their sense of ownership over their outcomes of working with it, but also sort of help people understand like what they need to get good at. So we have that in a few cases in our product now where it's almost like the more context that you can give the AI that's relevant to you. And some of that can be factual context about your situation. Some of it could be your judgmental context. Like, well, this is what I think is important in this. The more of that you can give to the AI, the better your generations can be. And so building out those literal user experiences where people can have those type of interactions with AI while still sort of focusing on the work product they're working on, the outcome they're working on, I think is what like will be a big thing next year. So sort of like I don't actually think it is inspired by, I almost said inspired, but we had this concept, this user experience concept of you have the AI, but then you also have like the work you're working on and the center, and the AI is sort of an addition to this. So I think that becoming more of a common thing of like, we're still working on this core asset of output, which in our case might be a hiring decision or a role definition or a, training interviewers or something like this. You still have this outcome, but everyone also has access to the super intelligence on the side to help them sort of like get it to where they need it to be.
Yeah, I love that. I love the co-pilot idea and the fact that there's a kind of training loop. I think that's where the value is kind of, to your point, capturing those kind of interview notes. And then you have something to really kind of go back to, and that there is a training modal in that. Whereas I think in 2024, the main focus has been automating resume, CV scanning, skill assessment, and matching candidates with job requirements. I think that 2024 for me has more been about how can we use AI for volume recruiting, as opposed to thinking about it in terms of that kind of training loop. How do we get more value out of it? So it fits into that kind of narrative around efficiency gains, quote unquote productivity, but albeit with volume hiring. And I think what you're talking to is really around, okay, well, we're implementing something that's a co-pilot that will actually, allow you to assimilate a lot of information, reflect that back to you, but there are training gains in that. And I think that's, for me, if I'm just sort of predicting for 2025, that's where the value is. That's where the real value is for people and talent, kind of leaders and businesses.
I agree with you, and I think a really good observation on the maybe the more of the automation at the volume level has been the sort of the recent sort of important stuff. The thing that I would, again, like with this echo chamber in mind is, yes, it takes the form of a co-pilot. That's true in our product, for example. It's true in many other products. But when you also think about, just so we don't have this sort of sense that it's just a co-pilot for everyone, there is some displacement built into that. So if I take an example, let's imagine, pre-AI, I interview someone, I think they're amazing. My next step is I go and speak to my sourcer and I say, source more people like that, please. Here was their resume. This is the companies that. So the sourcer was my co-pilot. I was giving the instruction to the sourcer. So now if I start to give that instruction I'm working on this thing, I'm working on this hire, my instruction goes to the AI. Maybe the AI will start to sort of build that market, do a part of that job, right? It will identify, well, these are the companies that this person worked at. So I've done instead of just saying, that's a good person, and then the sourcer goes away and looks up, well, who were they? Which companies did they work at? I'll go and make the market map. So there is displacement within co-pilots. I don't think people should purely interpret co-pilots as everyone is going to be, just stick to what you're doing. You're going to be totally fine. Just have a co-pilot now. No, like in some cases, me as an operator, if my path of least resistance, if the way for me to get the output I want most quickly is to speak to my AI about it, as opposed to speak to, someone who has like much lower response times via Slack. Maybe they're only in later, maybe they're going to respond later tomorrow to say, I'll do that. Then I'm going to do that. And that's the way the world's going to go. And that's not because I'm a bad person. I'm trying to get a job done. And the quickest way for me to get that job done is to instruct my co-pilot to help me with elements of that rather than ask one of my teammates to do it. So that's not a Metaview specific example, to be clear. I'm just using that as an example of not sort of thinking that the co-pilot is this panacea that's going to have no disruptive, impact whatsoever. It is going to disrupt because it's going to become the thing that I rely on, maybe in place of another member of my team.
And it feeds into that changing look and feel of a people and talent function, which is exciting, I think.
But this then goes, or does it not go into the direction to have now co-pilots? Let's imagine we have more co-pilots in the space. Does that mean I have less people in my recruitment team because I don't need them anymore because hiring managers have co-pilots? And then, we'll meet at one point where we say, look, the hiring manager comes to me. Let's say I'm a director of talent, right? Comes to me and says, Matthias, my co-pilot managed to help me to find the ideal candidate. Let's make them an offer, right? And the co-pilot already advised me on that comp and ben package that they need. And can you just sign it off? Because it seems like you're the one person that signs this off. Like, is that the world we imagine this in? Because, honestly, we had this in the other episode that we said, this assumes that hiring managers clearly know what they want. And so many times they do not know what they want. They do not know what kind of performance and what good looks like is. And having now a co-pilot with someone who, let's say, is not as mature as maybe others, because they have much more experience in practice, what does that do then? Is that not a dangerous path if we think this a little bit through?
I think it's frustratingly sort of. I mean, I don't know if this is like helpful, but so a couple of things that are definitely true. Obviously, every company is trying to be successful. They're trying to win, and so if they repeatedly have hiring managers who make bad decisions and they end up losing, then the markets will create a solution to this. And maybe that solution will be, well, let's have some people dedicated to making sure our hiring is really good. And why don't we call those people recruiters? And then suddenly we're like, Back to the Future. Yes, we do need recruit. So that could happen. I think what you described could happen because people sort of take the immediate, what seems like a short-term benefit of having a lower headcount in the company because those tasks are gone away. But then you'll realize, okay, we're not reliably hiring. And obviously, if it turns out those people are reliably hiring the best people, then yeah, we've got to, hey, maybe that is the right way to go. But we obviously believe that they probably won't because there's no reason to believe these folks will be so expert at it. The other thing that's true is that every company is seeking, every person, but also certainly every company is also seeking operating leverage. They're all trying to do more with less. Some companies will take that ability to do more with less to reduce headcount, for sure. Some people will take that ability to do more with less to think, well, we can get even more value out of these people, so we should hire more of them. We should, we've got more. Every time we hire one of these recruiters, they're actually able to help us hire, 50% better people because they have these amazing, they know how to leverage these amazing tools and do this. And so we should hire more of them because they're more value for money. And we should definitely stop using external recruiters who we don't train up on our stack and these sorts of things. As an example, you might go the other way. You might say, listen, recruiting is such a specialism. Actually, it makes sense, to use externals. I don't know. So I think that is potentially what you described could be what happened. The marketplace of ideas will determine what the best way to go about it is. My belief is that the value of the person, the human in the loop, who's responsible for ensuring high quality, like very high quality hires are made consistently across the company, will become a very high, is already, but will become a much even higher value role. And I think that person will have the support of other people to propagate the best practices and whatnot that are quite human best practices. And those people are going to be called the recruiting team.
Yeah, interesting one. I think it's what you kind of touch upon there is maybe there's a loose, but there is a segue into kind of almost the kind of predictions for 2025, because we've touched upon perhaps what 2024 has looked like. 2025, some headline kind of trends for 2025 is agentic AI for employee experience, AI-driven talent marketplaces, and then a kind of almost a real focus on ethical AI and how that impacts kind of DEI. And even as a side one, which could be interesting for you specifically, Siadhal, is a bit of consolidation in the rec tech space. So, I mean, kind of picking off any one of those. I mean, I think you kind of touched upon AI-driven, kind of talent marketplaces. Do you think, from what you've seen, that could be a real opportunity or a real trend in 2025? So almost like almost like AI aggregated marketplaces for talent.
And by that you mean sort of the AI doing the matching? That's what you mean by the marketplace?
Yeah. So quite literally, yeah. I mean, it becomes just sort of like a larger marketplace for talent that you just kind of, you almost, have your license sign in, send your AI into that marketplace, and it starts to really sort of match the talent for you. And those data sources aren't just, say for instance, a LinkedIn coming to this and being like, oh, essentially, this is the LinkedIn marketplace. There are other data sources drawn into that marketplace. Now, that would obviously require a lot of interoperability and sharing of data. So I'm not even too sure that could be a reality. But the idea.
So I definitely don't. Yeah, the idea of that is, I think that your last point is the big problem there, which is how valuable, like how accurate, how representative is the data that we have about ourselves online. I don't know. I think that's, and then with sort of the regulations we have around obviously people controlling their data, it's always going to be, you're not going to have some one size fits all situation where everyone has perfect data about themselves out there, and therefore, we're able to make these decisions purely via like publicly available information. So I'm not convinced on that one. I do think it will be part of it, because there's matching that's already happening on very basic levels, right? Like, okay, they have, they have a degree and they have this experience, so they're good. That's happening. And so I think that will get more sophisticated. I just don't think I think we're talking about like maybe double-digit percentage improvements. We're not talking about like a 10x change in how that gets done or something.
Perhaps it comes from the consolidation piece. Sorry, I was just thinking maybe there's a link there in terms of the consolidation and a broader kind of talent marketplace. But we'll kind of come back to that. I was just please continue. Go on.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I believe that the most important data by far is in the conversations. So you could get to a world, and most important, but also, if I interview with a company today, and then interview another one in 6 months, some of that is the same data. Some of that's going to be new data, because hopefully I've achieved something else in the last 6 months. Maybe, there's have a bunch of other answers. So it's also always changing, right? It's very rich and sort of dynamic. Anyway, but the point is, I believe the most valuable data is the proprietary data you have when you speak with candidates is the most important data available. That getting shared, I think there could be like a massive play somewhere down the line where somehow we all have access to, like, with the right sort of permission structure, somehow have access to all of the conversation. But it seems a little, it's far-fetched from where I am right now. So if you believe that the information that I share with you during a conversation with you is much richer and frankly much more interesting than what I have on my like uncurated LinkedIn profile that I never really think about because I'm an in-demand person. I don't have to keep it up to date. I don't give a shit. Then, I think it's going to be hard to sort of, to believe the talent marketplace is going to work at the sort of, the high performing jobs. I don't think that will be a thing. Maybe in like the much more transparent, do they have this qualification? Do they work in this area? Like you can get some gains by being a little bit smarter, leveraging AI, but not in the part of the world that I think about most.
Well, there we go. From a co-founder to anybody going through an incubator or accelerator program at the moment, if you're thinking about a talent marketplace or aggregator, bin that idea for the moment.
Unless you can get people to submit very relevant data, I think that's the chicken and egg situation. Is so the most important, I don't know, most important, but a really important thing to think about when you're thinking about where AI can step in and be really helpful is context. The AI has to have the relevant context. This is which you can see that in the very micro. Like if you go to ChatGPT and give it a terrible prompt, like if I just write me a job description, I didn't even tell it what the role was. I didn't tell it anything. I just said it will do it. It will probably go and do it for you. And of course it will be terrible because it could be for a totally different role than the. So what you do is you sort of, when you're using these products day to day, you realize, okay, I need to give it more context than that. I need to give this context, this. And right now it's all from you. You're feeding the context directly in. I do think one of the things that is really powerful about AI in business applications is you can obviously give it context manually, but it can also suck in context from your other business systems to make much better predictions about what you're probably trying to achieve here and therefore what a good generation is. But anyway, in the context of this marketplace idea, if you're going to build a great marketplace, you'd have to believe that you can provide context that is really you have to be able to provide context that is actually going to enable the AI to do this matchmaking at a higher level. One way to think about, not totally, but another way to think about the value of AI is not necessarily, I mean, there's some points it's going to do superhuman, super intelligent things like, solve equations that we've never been able to solve before, whatever, things, stuff that I don't really know about. But right now, mainly the way it's used is it can make really good, essentially predictions much more quickly because it can go through like reams and reams of data in a few seconds in order to draw correlations and synthesize the main themes and then produce that for you. It's not actually that humans can't do that. It's just that for me to do it, it will take me 5 days and I need to hire a team to go and do it. And that's the really amazing thing about it. So if you're sort of asking, if you're thinking of it doing sort of things that are, it can only do things that are possible, I guess is what I'm saying. Like if it has lots of information about you as a human being, it might know what role you'll be suited for. If it also has lots of information about that role and about that company and about that hiring manager, that's a lot of context. That's a lot of proprietary context for you to be able to give the AI, which I think doing sort of in a sort of a marketplace will be really hard. I think our approach makes more sense for now, which is, well, we buddy up with the company. We make sure the company gives us as much context as possible, mainly ambiently, because we partner with them. And then we have these conversations with candidates. And maybe that's going to help with maybe using all of that data, we can help with some proprietary insights about who might and might not be a match. But I think to just do that out in the wild as like a marketplace, massive company if it happens, but I think it's not, you can't do it now. And maybe down the line, I don't know.
And I think, look, I think this is why maybe also the way of how people, leaders need to think about the near future of what they do. They are system architects, right? So they build systems or foundations in order to let AI drive and optimize these systems. But these systems need to come from the organizations. And I think this is something that is super powerful, because the AI tool that you use can only be as powerful as the data and the structure that you give it, the context that you put in there, right? I always compare prompt engineering with like interviewing, right? You can have lots of interviews. That does not mean you're good in interviewing, right? Because if you don't ask the right questions and you don't understand how to assess certain skills, then what do you do, right? I think we can all have a coffee chat. We see so many podcasts out there, right? That does not mean they're all good, right? But everybody can do a podcast these days, right? So, I mean, look, this is something where I get very obsessed with the idea of, I agree with Siadhal on this topic of the power of data is in the conversations you have with candidates, besides the resumes or the profiles you find. But I think now this pivot point is, imagine through every interview process that you go through with your profile, it enriches your profile and you actually sharpen your skills because of those interviews, because of the experience you made. And then you put this in a platform and helps you to match certain future job opportunities because of this data point. If we think this out through, I think this is super great, and it will build the next LinkedIn to a certain extent, right? Because the problem we currently have right now, and I think probably most of the companies that I know of, is the data accuracy and the data structure. Yeah, it's broken so many times, and that's why tools can already do a lot. But implementation is not set up correctly. The data is completely broken. That's why it gives you the wrong decision making.
Yeah,
I
think that's.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think we'll quickly move beyond the idea that the sort of system or the data is broken and move more, because funny enough, that's obviously one of the things that matters less. Like having really structured data to input is less important, because AI is really good at understanding unstructured data, even if you have reams and reams of it. So I do think it's still, it almost becomes more akin to like what these big LLM companies are doing, right? The LLM companies, they work on weight. They work on weights. You know, they weight different things within the LLM. I can imagine that being like increasingly how people, when you talk about building the system as a leader in TA, it was probably, maybe it's partially about the weighting. Like we know this stuff is present in our culture docs. It says that these things are important, and we just write them all up and we put them there. And we sort of know deep down, actually, the first one, that's by far the most important. And the others, you know, we sort of have this almost institutional knowledge around what we really mean, but we just put them out there as branding and hope that people can follow them. But I think the weighting of these things, which could end up getting quite precise, and that's almost how you set up this environment, that's creating the environment for AI to help you a lot, partly by giving it access to the right information, partly by giving it the relevant weightings of that information, like how important is this are these various things. Just for clarity between us, of course, but also, you know, between us, I'm talking into the future. Maybe 2025. I think that might be too soon. I think it's probably still too early for that to be like the primary role of these. I think we're more talking when we have like some maturity of how AI is helping us like in meaningful ways within our workflows. And then this is the optimization becomes like how do we create this sort of great environment for it to help us even more.
With regards to the sort of agentic AI for employee experience, I want to kind of siphon that off slightly and just be like, where do you see, what one or two or three things, valuable things do you think implementing kind of AI, and use Metaview clearly as an example, where's the value for the employee or candidate experience going into 2025 beyond it's quick to apply, you get some, kind of like, scheduling is easier and quicker, that the more kind of like basically administrative stuff, which is fine for a while, but where's the value coming from when you think about kind of implementing an AI platform? What am I getting? I think you touched upon, the quality of the data, but how does that translate to me as a candidate or an interviewee? Where's the value for me?
Yeah. So the way I mentioned earlier, I think hiring could be far higher probability. You could have a world where more often than not, you make a hiring decision and it's the right decision, which I think right now isn't the case. Most of the time people make a hiring decision and it's just 50-50, it feels like in a lot of cases. And also hiring could be way more efficient. So let's focus on the sort of precision or the reliability, the probability of making good hires. Right now, when I get to the end of an interview process, I'm a candidate. I've just spent, maybe in aggregate 6 hours with this company through various interviews, plus did a bunch of prep for the, case study I had to do and the presentation. And it's been, it's been a thing. And some of the interviewers I had really good rapport with, which is valuable. And, hard to quantify that stuff. I do still think that stuff is important, by the way. So when you get into this world of like, hey, are we just going to like make these decisions based? No, I think rapport, like there's obviously room for bias with those things, but it's still a real thing. So anyway, some I had good rapport with, some I didn't, and maybe one of the interviews actually went even badly. Who knows? These things can happen. Right now, if I get to the end of that process and there's that one interviewer for whom it went badly, I've got a lot of uncertainty in the room around, the person who interviewed me 2 weeks ago is like now unsure of, wait, hey, were they all that because this person's saying that they're terrible. In a world where you can, even just based on this debate that's happening around the candidate, where an AI can pull up through this 6 hours of audio, which is going to have however many thousand words in it, where no one is going to assess themselves manually. But while you're having this discussion, it can pull up examples that either confound or confirm or go against what certain people are saying. That's great for me as a candidate. I can know that if I show up and I'm a good fit for the role, that actually those nuggets are going to be unearthed. Because right now I don't know that. If I'm at work interviewing in a company that's not actually capturing this data, it's just relying on, was the interviewer paying enough attention at the time to hear what I'm saying, then it's just in the lap of the lap of the gods. So that's a very tangible benefit for both the hiring team who want to be more confident about their hiring decisions. It often gets them to make their decisions more quickly. How many times anyone who's sort of been part of hiring loops will know that time, oh yeah, great candidate, but let's see who else is out there type thing, because you didn't, you're not at the confidence level you need. That goes away, and that's for both the hiring team and the candidate. So I think that is really important. I think that's like at the heart of recruiting. I do think a lot of things you mentioned around, well, let's not do administrative stuff like scheduling and whatnot. We don't have to talk about those things, but they're also important because that also is the thing that partially results in a hiring going from like taking like 4 to 6 weeks, even for like one person on average, because you have to like juggle all these things. And you're a great candidate. I'd love for the hiring manager to interview next week, but they can't because they're interviewing 3 other candidates who actually we think are less of a good fit, but I'm going to have to schedule you for 2 weeks out. Like all of those things do contribute to like a bad hiring experience and maybe ending up not in the right place. So I think there's like almost too many to name of like very tangible ways that you can start to improve the experience on both sides.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that time plays a huge factor in making the right decision or the wrong decision as well. So many times time is much more of a criteria than we would like to have it, right? Because if a great candidate applies way too late, but you're already in parts of full motion of the hiring process, this person might just miss out. So, Glenn, after hearing all of this, I feel like we kind of believe in the echo chamber to be true.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree that there are certain elements that are kind of agreeable for sure, but I think Siadhal's kind of illustrated a couple of things as well in terms of the piece around kind of co-piloting and not thinking AI specifically as a co-pilot and thinking about the change that comes as a result of using that as a co-pilot, which I think is a really important distinction. I think in terms of the piece around kind of talent marketplaces, AI-driven talent marketplaces, that needs a lot more thinking and coordination. So I think there's certain predictions for 2025 that could create these small echo chambers, which I think he's talked to and kind of given his expertise and thoughts on that based on. And this is a key thing, I think. Whilst Siadhal is co-founder of Metaview, he's a practitioner. He's in this space doing this, right? So this is not like a curated commentary. This is his day to day, and I think there's to his point. Think about the source of the information that you're kind of bringing into your echo chamber, and the diversity of those sources, and being in a position to kind of critically assess your McKinseys, your PwCs. Because remember, to his point, they are selling services. They're selling consultancy as well.
Yeah.
So I think I think we've validated certain elements of the echo chamber, but I think Siadhal's made some really important kind of observations and contributions to how we can help ourselves, take that step back and kind of critically assess and offer new opinions that keep that healthy debate going. You know what I mean? And to your point, Siadhal, reduce the kind of fear factor, the resistance factor. There's no point resisting this. It's happening and will continue to happen. It's just really in terms of your kind of understanding and willingness to go with that change and kind of look further forward. So I think we're on both sides actually, inside and outside.
Yeah. Siadhal, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. Actually, I was not sure if you could convince us, but you did a fantastic job with this. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me on. Been a great conversation. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Enjoy. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.